Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming and participating in our community awareness program. If everybody could please stand and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I So before I introduce Mr. Nate Smith, I want to give you some of the guidelines that we're going to be using for this particular program. When Nate is going to do his presentation, you may ask him a question after he has done his presentation. I will have two people on this side of the room, two people on this side of the room. You may ask a question and then sit down. If it is not a question that pertains to the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension, your mic will be silenced. This is only for the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension. This is not anything to do with Sunset Crossroads. It doesn't have to do anything with the revitalization downtown, and it doesn't have anything to do with Banning Point. This is strictly only for the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension. So I want to make sure that's perfectly clear because your mic will be cut off if it doesn't pertain to what Nate is talking about, okay? So we'll go ahead and get started. And you know what? I'm sorry, Nate. Mike, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, come on up. Mike Romero is going to give us a report.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Romero. I'm the Director of Security here for Sun Lakes Country Club on behalf of Securitas. We're here to help out in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going to be brief with this report so that way we can go on with your presentation. We are dedicated in ensuring a safe and secure living environment for all members of the community. This monthly security report is designed to keep you informed and updated on various security and safety matters. I'm going to address some issues regarding speeders and stop signs, violations, enforcement of citations within our community, and how to report violations, as well as election season and how we are preparing and enforcing Sun Lakes rules and regulations. First subject matter is going to be our traffic patterns here at Sun Lakes. So speeding on our streets poses a significant risk to our pedestrians, cyclists, and other drivers. It not only increases the likelihood of accidents, but it also endangers lives and diminishes the quality of our community. With so many concerns being brought up to our attention by the community, my department has been tasked with observing and reporting these violations to the board's attention. On random dates and times, Lieutenant Roman and I will be seen on intersections that have observed several violations, specifically vehicles that have failed to come to complete stop, speeding through the community. Our body cams that we like to carry with us at all times will be recording when we are doing these observations. We're going to attach such footage to our reports as we observe them. This includes for your guests as well, folks, so make sure you let your guests know to comply with the stop signs and speed enforcements, okay? All we're doing is just observing and reporting. We're not enforcing any penalties on our part. Which will be determined by the Safety Committee and the Master Board, which is still up for discussion to my understanding. Abiding by the speed limits and being mindful of our driving behaviors is a way to actively contribute to the well-being of our neighborhoods, as we ask that all residents and guests please observe their speed limits, stay alert and vigilant, and lead by an example for others to follow. How to report those violations. Your active involvement is essential in maintaining a safe and secure community. Residents are encouraged to call us directly to report any violations or concerns. This includes incidents such as suspicious activity, safety hazards, or breaches of the community rules. Your vigilance and willingness to report issues contribute significantly to the safety and well-being of this community. We are not active on Facebook, so we encourage residents to call security first to report any suspicious activities and concerns related to Sun Lakes. All calls are answered by our dispatcher and call center, not the gate officers. We have a dispatcher that takes in all the calls for that. Our gate officers will only make outgoing calls when trying to retain clearance for residents. If you folks like to report any violations or concerns, you can contact us at the following number, 951 area code 845-2163. Once again, that's 951-845 2163. It's election season here at Sun Lakes, and my department is preparing to ensure that we serve the community by enforcing its rules and regulations. As per Securitas policy, my team is strictly forbidden from giving any political opinions or siding with any political parties involved. We will remain 100% neutral and unbiased in all political matters. Our focus will be on following Sun Lakes guidelines and enforcing regulations regarding the placement of political signs that are prohibited in areas such as common grounds like Sun Lakes facilities, which is the main clubhouse, the North Clubhouse, and the South Clubhouse. Areas not owned by residents, such as grassy areas and the center medians, are prohibited from having any political signs on there. My team will thoroughly document these findings and will attach pictures and send them over to PNC for review. In conclusion, your commitment to the safety and security of our community is valued and vital. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to our community security team. My name is Mike Romero. I'm your Director of Security. Next in command is Lieutenant Roman, and together we can continue to make our community a safe and welcoming place for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that report. Okay. Just to remind the people that just came in, I want to make it very clear that after Nate makes his presentation, you are able to ask, you may stand up, ask one question, sit down, let him answer it. We have a lot of people in here, there are a lot of questions, and the questions must pertain only to the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension. It is not for the crossroads, it is not for Banning Point, it is not for the revitalization, it is not for wastewater management. It's for none of those things. It is only for the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension. If you happen to go off on another tangent, we will cut your mic. Okay, we want to make sure that all the questions are getting answered at the best that Nate can do. So right now I'm going to invite Nate to come up here.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Nate Smith. I am the Deputy Director of Public Works and City Engineer for City of Banning. A couple things before I get going on this presentation. This is going to be, my presentation is not up on the screen. I'll get that in a second. This is going to be a kind of shortened presentation to what we did to council back in October as far as the slides go. I do have some information I will pass along. I'm aware of some of the community concerns that have been telegraphed in advance of this meeting, and I'm going to try to discuss some of those items as we get to it. I do have another meeting at 2 o'clock back at City Hall I need to be at, so I do need to excuse myself by about 1:45 for that. So, as we move forward, we'll just kind of keep that in mind, right? So I've been doing these public presentations for this project and any other projects for years now. This is a good-sized group. It's surprising to me that after 15 years, I'm still getting nervous. My mom has always said, when you get nervous, you talk too fast. That was comments after my last presentation here. So I have, Marisol from the city. She's going to be my gauge on my speaking speed and the one telling me to slow down if I start speaking a little bit too quickly there. So let me get the presentation up and we'll get started. All right. So we're talking today about the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension, the westward extension. Essentially it's a project that's going to stop or close the gap that exists out there today. So anybody who's driven out to Highland Home, as you're very well aware, there is a 4-lane road that is dead-ending at Highland Home. That road was anticipated, at least when they designed it, and this community back in the 80s, to punch through. There was always going to be a road that was going to extend to connect to Sunset. That hasn't happened yet, obviously. The road is not there. So we are looking at this project as a way to fulfill what that design intent was when the community started, and what we have that's been in our general plan since at least 2006. So we'll get into a little bit of the project background. Next. So this has been a planned arterial roadway in the general plan documents that I have going back to at least 2006. But again, if you look at the intent of the road and what's built out there today, it was intended to be a major road facility connecting further to the east back when this community was conceptualized and designed initially. The current project, this iteration of it, because it has gone through a couple iterations in the last, 35 years. The current iteration of it started with a amendment to the circulation element back in 2019. And that was to move the alignment from the connection point on Sunset to where it is as part of this project. There was a previous entitlement on the vacant land to the east that was looking to build homes out there. I think it was the Five Bridges project. That was all before I started with the city. I should have said that. I've been with the city for 2 years. So that was all before my time that was starting here. So the process for this project started back in, conceptualized within staff in 18, presented to city council, adopted in 19. Looking ahead into 2020, we had an RFP go out for design on this project. It was awarded by council at that point. And we have been going through the process of designing the roadway facility, obtaining our environmental permits, and getting to a point where we have something that's buildable since that time. It's disheartening that 4 years down the road, we're still in that process, but that is how design and construction unfortunately works, in California at this point. It is a very slow process to move a major infrastructure project along. The right-of-way, you can see in the bottom, you guys can see my laser there, right? So the original project that we started designing back in 2020, the road was more along where we have that, there's a very well faked-in roadway there. It was on that faked-in roadway. That was right-of-way that was dedicated and offered to the city back in the early 90s as part of parcel map 25541. So, there again, this has been a work in progress for a very long time to get to where we're at. One of the biggest hurdles that we have is environmental clearance. So, as you know or are aware of that property, there are two major creek crossings, right? There's not often a lot of water in them, but they are still considered to be habitat area and watershed area. One of the steps that we have to go through that has been slow is our DBESP. So that's I always butcher the acronym, the Determination of Biologically Equivalent or Superior Preservation. So in essence, we are going to be building a culvert over those creeks to have the roadway go over it. We have to then determine how much habitat and creek area is disturbed and find an equivalent amount or greater that we are going to preserve elsewhere as part of this project. And that is a cost that the project does have to incur. And this is a cost that is for public projects, private projects, anybody who's impacting cultural, biological, or waterways. All projects have to deal with this. It's a very slow process working with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife as well as the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife. So our initial submittal of the DBEPS went to them in December of 2022. They did come back with comments in March of 2023. And some of their comments were interesting. So the corridor that we wanted to build in, obviously, is along Westward Avenue. It's a nice straight corridor. There's utilities in there. There's a lot of utilities in there. We've got sewer, water, non-potable water. There's fiber communication. There's oil transmission. There's all these things that run through that corridor, most of which actually run through this community as well, and actually out of the parking lot right behind us. We have to avoid those, right? There's a lot of things on there that we cannot build on top of. Well, the letter came back and said, we don't care, you have to build on top of it anyway. So, beginning in March of 23, we went through a process of trying to figure out how do we meet the comments that were made by these wildlife agencies, as well as the requirements from the utility holders that we don't build on their property, that are diametrically opposed to each other, and have a project that does move forward. So we spent some time going through looking at the different alternatives, had a lot of conversations, a lot of different meetings with different agencies, and we came up with the idea that, unfortunately, we are going to have to redesign a portion of the roadway. The connection points are set, right? I can't move Highland Home. That's set, that's established. I can't move Westward and Sunset. That's set. But what we can do is work with the different agencies on the modifications that are going to be necessary. And what we're looking at doing is essentially, I call it the dip. So it's this kind of area between those two humps. that's very technical engineering terminology there. We're essentially removing the dip, right? So it actually creates a little bit of a straighter roadway, which is actually going to be a safer roadway. It's actually very, very slightly cheaper. Not significant enough, but it's probably not going to keep pace with where inflation has been at on construction materials. So we went through this, we looked at the environmental compliance, we went back to council, all right, here we go, talked about all that. We went back to council with a contract amendment that was approved as part of this presentation back in October, I think 25th is what I had on the first slide. That was in earnest where we were kicking off this new design effort to move that roadway. So currently, you can see from the graphic here, it's very light, so my apologies, but the roadway is now parallel to the pink and yellow lines. And those pink and yellow lines are pipelines that are held by oil transmission, fuel transmission, it's FERC regulated energy transmission pipelines, right? They get a lot of say. They have a lot of coverage. So that's where we are at now. We have completed the horizontal design. We have completed the vertical design. And their consultant that's working on this is currently updating the minor updates to our drainage. And then they are starting off the additional environmental work that is needing to be performed to update that DBEST document that we can then resubmit to the county, get a determination. They give us a thumbs up from wildlife agencies, and we can move forward with the next phase of getting this project ready for construction. So we've been fortunate that for this project, the funding that has been allocated thus far has come from our regional partners. So $1 million has been allocated by Western Regional Council of Governments thus far to cover the design aspects of this project. So they cover probably about 90 to 95% of the design expenses we have on it. They don't cover permitting. They don't, if I have a meeting with the utility agency, they don't cover that cost. That's staff time. That's on me. But they cover the vast majority of the costs we have for this. Their program also has other funding opportunities, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there hasn't been a whole lot of city commitment other than my time and my staff's time on making sure that this project is continuing to move forward. It's not cheap. So we're building a mile of roadway, 1.01 miles. And with current construction costs, environmental mitigation, trying to anticipate unit cost increases for inflation, utility relocations, everything that goes along with it, we're projecting it's going to cost about $33 million to build 1 mile of road. Yeah. So the unfortunate side of that, right, is this is not that out of line with what other agencies are dealing with throughout Riverside County. It's just gotten to a point where a facility like this is this expensive. Now, we don't have land acquisition, right? Other agencies have land acquisition that would add millions more to this project. We anticipate about 3.5 to 4 million of it is environmental mitigation. And that's because we're building 110 foot across a creek for a roadway, and that's what they're saying that's the cost. So there's a lot of items on here that do add up significantly. So I heard a comment in here, is it worth it? And that's one of the things that we always have to weigh whenever we're taking a look at this is, the pros and cons, costs, benefits, where do we tie in with everything on there? We have an opportunity to build this project using a lot of other people's money, which is great. The best projects are the ones that I don't have to pay for directly. And so we take a look at that and we say, where are the costs and where are the benefits? The benefits to this project are numerous, right? One, it's been planned, or it's been conceptualized at least since the early 80s. It provides a connection for this community to the rest of the city that does not exist now. It provides for increased response time. Our police station is downtown. Station 20 is downtown, or I'm sorry, Station 2 is downtown, Station 20 is across the freeway. We provide for them to be able to access this community quicker. There's additional evacuation routes. You know, I know there's been, you know, like I said, I've been in this area. I grew up in Redlands. My aunt and uncle, before they passed, they live in this community. I'm familiar with this community. There have been fires on that South Hill more than once. This will provide an additional connection and escape route in the event that there's an evacuation that's necessary. Our transit system is not very efficient because we are stuck in the same traffic everybody else is, getting back and forth across Highland Springs to get people to places of employment, out to downtown, out to the outlet malls. Our transit does cover out to the outlet malls, if you're interested. I believe it's Route 5. By building this connection and not needing the buses to rely on going through Highland Springs, I can speed up how the buses are operating through the city, potentially reduce the headway time, so there's more reliable service. It's not going to be every hour and a half, maybe it's every hour. You know, there's something like that. There's benefits there. The traffic impacts on this primarily benefit this community. So traffic patterns are generally, right now, into Beaumont and west, right? So a person who lives in Beaumont is going to continue to use Highland Springs as a primary access point to get across the freeway or to get to points west. Or they'll head to Beaumont Avenue, California, wrap all the way around Potrero. I know I've done that. You know, so that's where a lot of that traffic's gonna go. This community, the benefit that you guys are gonna have is that you don't have to wait in that same Highland Springs traffic, especially if you're on the east side of the community. If you're using gate, I forget what gate that is it gate 3 or 5? Gate 3. So if you're using gate 3, this puts you very close to Sunset, where right now there is no delay getting on and off the freeway at that point. You know, there's a lot of opportunity there. Hopefully at some point in the future that there's more draw within the city of Banning, that we're gonna be looking to try to capture some retail dollars, retail development, and all that kind of stuff. But as of right now, there's not a lot of draw on the south side of the freeway that's going to drag people from Beaumont through the area and out to Sunset. So this project, as we're looking at it, started in 2019, a standalone project, right? The traffic impact, while there will be increased traffic, that will happen, we did take a look at what those impacts could be for this community. We have to go through a process, it's called warrant analysis, and we look at the traffic modeling, we look at the delay that's gonna be caused, and delay is the #1 factor as to whether or not some form of mitigation is gonna be required. Currently, you have a stop-controlled intersection at your main gate. The traffic study for this project, as it stands by itself, wasn't showing that there was enough delay caused that there would be a need for traffic signals. So this project on its own. Now, I know that, you know, questions will come up, you know, what if this builds, what if that builds? Every project that does come through is required to study and mitigate those impacts. So if there are other projects that would be traffic generators that would draw more traffic this way, they would be required to study, mitigate, and pay to install certain devices. Additionally, we are just now preparing a RFP at the city. Our fee study, our impact studies, they're stale. They've been around for about 4 years now, and they should be updated probably about every 5 years. We're in the process of getting started. So as we're looking at this, now that we have a road project that's looking like it's more likely, right? We can put in there as part of this fee study is to potentially investigate if there's going to be additional impacts, and a development impact fee can start to be charged and collected over time to use to mitigate additional impacts that may happen for this community. So a lot of the items that are in our current study have been built. You know, so it's a time to take a look at what's been built, what needs to be addressed, what are new requirements, and include that in there as part of the project. With the last fee study, Sun Lakes Boulevard was not included as part of that. You know, there are no projects on the Sun Lakes Boulevard within the current fee study. That's something that I'm looking to try to identify is what do we need to do, especially at the main gate, to account for that and to plan for that into the future. But this project, again, as a standalone project, on an average day, right, is not going to have a huge traffic impact. Now, there are special cases, right? You know, we do know the 10 can be a disaster. I used to come here for Easter. Getting in the gates is a disaster. So, you know, there are special cases, and, you know, part of what's going to happen that always happens when you have traffic, when you have a new project, is people will adjust their behavior for when those events type to happen. You know, I would go through gate 5. You know, we go through there. I would access the community that way to visit family. You know, that's a good thing. I see the sign that goes out there now. It says event, go to gate 5. You know, that changes. Your community is also not as susceptible to peak times, right? You guys don't have children in school. If you know that 8 o'clock is particularly bad, you know, unless there's a doctor's appointment or some reason you have to go, it's easier to time shift in a community like this to say, well, 8:30 is usually fine. I can leave at that point. That's just the normal human behavior that that you just go through adaptation with whenever there's any kind of road improvement. You see it with express lanes. You see it with freeway widenings. You see it with road closings. You know, when they closed Main Street in Riverside, traffic shifted. They allocated their time different. People access the community to have that pedestrian plaza that runs down there, right? So it's scary, I know, but for the average day and for the majority of the time, it works out. It'll be okay. But there will be times where it's not. You know, like I said, I've been here for Easter, I know. So the question is, you know, what is next? What are our next steps for the project? Where does the money come from? When does this get built? When am I going to be able to drive on this new roadway? So last June, we were awarded a $13.5 million grant from Riverside County Transportation Commission as part of their Measure A regional arterials program. So Measure A is the half-cent sales tax that you pay on all purchases throughout Riverside County, right? A component of that, some of that comes to us for road paving. You know, we get an annual allotment there. Some of that goes to regional projects. You know, RCTC has built interchanges throughout the county. Some of that is available through this Measure A regional arterials program. So we applied for it, looking at a project that, you know, was feasible to start construction by July of 25. And we were selected to be awarded for it, for the full award amount at $13.5 million. So we have a very, very good jump start on our funding. The Western Regional Council of Governments, they administer the TUMF program. If you're not familiar with that program, every home that is built, and every office that's built, and every industrial building that's built, and every retail store that's built pays a predetermined fee to WRCOG. So for a home, it's in the neighborhood of $10,000 per house, right? So every new home in the county pays that fee. Half of the money, roughly half of the money, goes to major countywide projects. So think Mid-County Parkway connecting Paris to I-15, or improvements on Van Buren between Riverside and up to Ontario. Major regional projects like that. And about half the money stays in our zone. So our zone is Calimesa, Beaumont, Banning, and Cherry Valley, essentially, areas of the county, right? That's our zone. So half the money that's collected for development in the zone stays in the zone. They go through and they do a nexus study, and they determine what are the regional projects that are necessary to build, you know, that are part of circulation elements, part of long-term plans. They say, here's the road, here's our unit cost for it, and then here's a dollar amount that's available for you guys to be able to build a facility. It can be built by private developers, it can be built by public agencies, but there's a dollar amount that's assigned for every roadway, every bridge, intersection, interchange, so on and so forth, that meets that study. Sun Lakes Boulevard is on that network. Sun Lakes Boulevard on that network has about, between one of the bridges and the roadway, about $20 million in funding that's been identified as for that project. So we've used $1 million of it already for design. We have, you know, with the zone, allocated about $4 million of that 20 for construction. So with the 13 and a half and what's allocated now, we're at 17 and a half. But that leaves about $16 million-ish that is still available for the roadway construction, that we are working with WRCOG staff on how to unlock that money and secure that money so that it can be utilized to build this road. We have local money. We do have our DIF program, so that is our traffic impact fee that we charge within the city. There is money that's held in there. That money can be used to help build the road. We do get Measure A money annually. We get SB1 money from the state, gas tax. We can allocate some of that money to build this road. The intent is trying to find a way to finance the project. And that's the step that we're at now is I've got a menu of options. What's going to be best, right? What is it that eventually that we're going to present to council? What are, these are reimbursement type programs. So what are carrying costs for it? What's that impact going to be to the city to go to council for a decision? We're probably a few months away from having anything yet. Like I said, we're just very early in that discussion. But with what we have a deficit of about $13.5 million, and I got potential for maybe another 16 to 20 million. And this is from money that developers have paid as impact fees to WRCOG, to the city, to RCTC. We continue to reach out to RCTC. I don't wish ill upon anybody. I would never do that. But if some of the other projects fall through, maybe there's some more money. These are complicated projects to build. They are very complicated projects to build. There's a lot of hurdles you have to go through. And there's a lot of people who sit there and say, I've got it, let's go. That someone discovers that a farmer left a irrigation line that leaked, and now it's considered to be marshland and wetland, and they have to redesign the roadway or not build it altogether. This happens. It's like my previous life, I worked in private consulting. They had a project where it was exactly that. It was a farmer that had a leaky irrigation pipe in his orange grove. And when he went to go fix it, because they were looking at potentially selling it, the agencies determined that as habitat, and he could not fix it. He had to maintain that. So crazy stuff happens, right? So our plan is to continue to look for funding to be able to build this road. We do have a clock. The RCTC, the Measure A money, we are obligated to expend our first invoice by July of 2025. That seems like a long way off, but that is going to go very, very quickly. So if we look at the schedule where you can see right now, fall of 23, the spring of 24, utility field work, we've done that. We've identified exactly where where the lines are, we've potholed it, we know where we're going to have to make relocations, and we know where we're going to beg and plead to let them have us leave it where it sits in the ground. The redesign of the roadway has been done. It's essentially, the design's complete, they got to update the plans, the specifications, so on and so forth. We're in the phase right now where we're updating the environmental documents. So as we go through and we update those environmental documents, that's going to be the key for getting the DBES back out on the street. We do have coordination that we need to do with Kinder Morgan. They are a petroleum pipeline purveyor. They have rights through there. And actually, if you look at Potrero over in the Beaumont side, there's a road, and there's a nice big wide open corridor. That wasn't because somebody wanted to put a nice linear park in there. That's because Kinder Morgan said, you can't build on my pipeline. So, we coordinate with them, get that encroachment permit. They've got a design. We have that process that we're going through with them right now as well. There's still a number of steps that we are working through to get to a point where we have a permit. Coming up this summer, after we get our DBES certified by the county, but a kind of a tacit blessing, if you will, from the wildlife agencies. At that point, we're able to go and make our formal applications. So we will, look into the fall, we'll have 100% plans, we can start bidding process, we can make our applications with Army Corps of Engineers, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, to get the permits that are necessary to be able to construct. We expect that that's going to take 6 to 9 months. So real quick, I'm at spring to be able to start construction. So, knock on wood. we anticipate construction is going to be about 18 months once we get started on there. The most difficult part on this is going to be utility relocation, especially at Westward Avenue. There's a lot of conflict over there. And building the culverts at the two creek crossing locations. Once those steps are complete, it's going to look like nothing's being done out there for a while. Once those steps are complete, then it's going to go pretty quickly as far as actually grading and putting the roadway improvements in. So, again, all things going fair, maybe the end of 2026, we'll have a roadway. And then we'll throw a big party. So that's kind of the broad overview of the project, kind of where we're at, what we need on there. At this point, if there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer some.
You're going to use that one. Okay, we're going to take from back and forth. So I will go down this side. Sally Jo will go down this side. We'll start from the back and we'll come up, and we're going to go back and forth. So we're going to try and get as many questions in as we can.
You've talked a lot about traffic and all your expenses. And what I think a lot of us are very interested in is what kind of traffic is going to be on this road. A lot of us are very concerned about trucks. What size of trucks? Are they coming down Sun Lakes Boulevard by gate 3, gate 4, gate 2, etc.? Or are the trucks going to be limited just to the size of like appliance delivery trucks, 18-wheelers versus 2-axle vehicles?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of points on that. First of all, any commercial vehicle that is accessing a particular business or where they are doing business is allowed on the roadway network. So if someone's using, what's one of the big moving companies that uses the big, 65-foot trucks, right? What was that? Mayflower. So if someone's moving with Mayflower, right, regardless, they are able to use the roadway to access where they are needing to go to do their business. The same is true for Albertsons. Their delivery trucks would be able to access the roadway to make their deliveries. There's a couple of things, as kind of follow-up to that are dependent on actions outside of my own. So, right now I understand that there's a project, the project across the street is in litigation. That there's a project that's to the east that is being considered but has not yet had any public hearings. So, from my perspective, from this road project, as a standalone project that started before, especially the project to the east was considered, right? There's not a generator for trucks. Those projects are required to make those studies. And I would defer to community development. I don't have that data with me on what exactly those impacts are for those projects as we go on here. As far as truck access, the city, we are currently working on a circulation plan element. It's an update as part of the general plan. It's been an ongoing project. Within there is a portion that is of talking about truck routes. And it is city council's discretion to approve, deny, or modify that. So we would make recommendations, and if city council direction is, this should be a no truck area, then we enforce that. We work at the behest of city council on those matters.
Karen, go ahead, over there. Does somebody have their hand up over here? Okay, go ahead, up in front.
That works. Okay.
Virginia, you need to use a mic, please. Can somebody give her a mic? I had them all turned on.
There, you can stay right here. Okay, I live on the north side. This morning, there might have been an accident, so the freeway goes very slow. I see the freeway every morning. And I know sometimes Ramsey will get packed because people getting off their freeway, getting back on the freeway, so forth. My concern is because we have a small portion of Sun Lakers, as myself, and we are very concerned about the semi-trucks going through. How fast the emergency vehicles will get there in case of a life-threatening illness of some sort. Things that we cannot be able to think about, but they will happen. So when you talk about trucks going to a destination, that's semi-truck sees that freeway,
Virginia,
bogged up.
Virginia,
Are they going to go from Sunset all the way straight through to Highland Springs and then on the freeway? Then every other trucker will follow them as well.
So, all right, this is working? Yes. So that goes back to the same thing. A truck that is serving a destination, I should have clarified, a truck that is serving a destination on that route has access to use the public road network to get there. If city council decides that trucks should be prohibited on this section of roadway that are not serving any particular business, then that is what the direction would be, and that is what police would be identified to enforce. So if it is not part of a road network, and if that is a decision, that's not a decision I make. If that's the decision the city council makes, then that is what can be enforced.
Hi. I kind of have a similar question. I was thinking, when traffic is crazy on the freeway, Ramsey gets busy, I'm sure it's going to be busy on Sunset as well. Also, when the industrial offices will be built, it seems like that's going to make it busier. And I think I'm just concerned, being in the middle of the community, it seems like we're going to get more traffic than we think.
So this, again, the land development projects, it's hard because they're happening kind of similar time frames, right? But this project was started and envisioned to happen without any of the development that's occurring there. Those projects are required to analyze and mitigate for their impacts. So if the project determines that 2-lane road is insufficient, that they need 3, then that project is responsible for building that. If the project determines that a traffic signal is necessary for the increased traffic, they're responsible for building that. But
Hi, I'm Leslie Novellis. I am on the school board, but I also have worked in planning. And my question to you is, why do we need this road? Exactly, because when you look at the ingress egress of Sun Lakes, and this road happens to be just between our community, is there really any real need other than the fact that you have $50,000 or $50 million coming up pretty soon? And I know you're going to say, well, this isn't your concern and they have to do a feasibility study, but I can guarantee you and everybody here that feasibility study is not going to work for us. So why do we need this road? Really, why do we need the road? I know that you already started it years ago. I get that, but Banning has changed and it's grown exponentially since this road was started. It was a good idea then, but why do we need it now?
I would say the number one complaint that we hear, not just here but in Beaumont as well, is that Highland Springs is terrible, and that it's impacting ability for emergency responders to get to the hospital. It's impacting first responders from being able to make it through from Station 20 if an ambulance is stationed there. If a train is blocked, it's terrible, right? And right now, there's no. I know Beaumont's working on a plan to try to separate Pennsylvania. That's years away, right? This provides an alternate so that instead of being stuck for 2.5 hours making it across the freeway and the train is stopped, that there is another route where emergency responders can come in. It's the ability to evacuate. But it was taking 2.5 hours to get across a freeway. So every project, there's pros and cons. And when we look at the overall positive impact, and when council made the decision to move forward, that was when they were weighing those things, those were the overweighing concerns.
I think we can all agree that traffic will increase no matter what we talk about, but I just have a simple question. Is there a consideration of putting a signal at gate 1 and gate 3 for our survival?
For this project on its own, it did not meet the warrants. Now, that's where I talk about where the diff study is. So there's the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices has a list of like 16 different categories, and you have to check off a certain number of them before you can put in a traffic signal. And this project on its own, without any land development projects, did not meet those warrants. Now, when we look at our fee update, that's again something that we're going to go back and take a look at, and I'm going to make a recommendation that we look at to see if that condition is going to change on the horizon here, about 20, 30 years out, and if we need to start collecting money to mitigate for that now.
Okay, Tom, nope, sorry, sit down. Okay, just remember, it is one question. Sir, go ahead, and then we have this lady right over here, please. I'm trying to get as many as I can.
Thank you very much. I'm really concerned with the physical design. At the end of Sun Lakes Boulevard today, when you build this new road, number one, what does it look like? Will it have 4 lanes and an aisle? Will there be traffic lights at the egress and ingress at the either ends? And what is the transition on Sunset going to look like? Where are there traffic lights and other things mitigated, ready to install in your design?
So this design, excuse me. So this design is building the ultimate roadway between Highland Home and Sunset. So that's 4 lanes of traffic, median, curb, gutter, bike lane, sidewalk. You know, as part of a cost saving, we may or may not landscape it. You know, I may save that for maybe a future opportunity. But it will be the ultimate roadway design from where the current termination is on Highland Home to Sunset. When we get to Sunset, Sunset is anticipated to be a 4-lane facility from westward up to the freeway. The widening on a portion of Sunset is not part of this project, but the intersection improvements are. So, you know, it's, you know, we have that we're going to be taking a look at. Westward is a concern. You know, it's something that we are looking at on what, you know, may happen there, and how we direct traffic to Lincoln, which is the preferred route for, you know, heavier vehicles for sure. You know, move forward. But we are building the ultimate roadway. Street lights will be on there, and you know, future land projects, if they warrant or they show that they warrant traffic signals, would construct those traffic signals.
You mentioned that we have 2 possible projects that are being considered, and you also mentioned that you guys are considering traffic as it exists today, and that those projects are supposed to consider the traffic. My concern is that one of those projects has already done their traffic study, and I don't know for sure about the other big one. What happens when these are happening at the same time? Who's going to be really responsible for making sure that the traffic as it exists, once this road is done, is okay?
So what happens sequentially? We're first, right? So any future project that comes in says, okay, this is done, right? We're the first layer on there, and they're going to add on top of what that basis is. So those additional studies are going to look at see what their additional impact would be, and they're required to improve for that. Until an entitlement exists, right? In my mind, there is no project, right? You know, it does not exist yet. But I'll say a traffic study, yeah, that's fine, but that does not entitle them for a right to be able to do anything. Those are actions that have to be taken by Planning Commission and City Council. And until those actions have happened and a decision has been made, that project is not real relating to this.
Right here, Sherry.
Hi, I'm your city council member for this district. And yes, I agree that Sun Lakes Boulevard was always planned for years and years, but it wasn't initiated until you had a developer who wanted to go in there and put 10 warehouses on each side and 5.5 million square feet. So that's what's the impetus of pushing this through. I mean, I think the road should go through. I'm not sure that it should go through to just supply trucks access. But my question is, the specific plan for Banning Point allows trucks to go out and go all the way to Sunset through Sun Lakes Boulevard Extension. However, the plan, as I understand it, for Sunset Crossroads and the 10 warehouses has in it where it has to stop at Highland Home. Those trucks can't go all the way to Highland. So my question is, how is that going to be possibly enforced? Because you're not going to have police sitting there day in and day and night checking that. And, you know, who's going to know what trucks are Banning Point trucks and what trucks are Sunset Crossroad trucks? But I think to just show this road as a standalone road and not talk about the 10 warehouses that are going to go on each side is really disingenuous.
Okay, so Sherry, could you just repeat your question so that Nate, just repeat your question only.
Okay, so my question is, in the specific plan, from my understanding, for Sunset Crossroads, it says that the trucks can come down Sunset, make a right onto Sun Lakes Boulevard, go into their projects, and then back out to Sunset. But Banning Point, if it's approved and goes forward, is going to be able to go make a left out of Banning Point to Sunset. So how do you regulate, you're allowing one 10 warehouses to just go from Sunset and back, which I don't know how you can do that. I mean, there's no law you can pass or anything, and you can't devote all the police officers there. So is that in the specific plan, and how would that be enforced?
So I will have to go back and check the SP on exactly what that language is. I did not research that point. I don't want to provide incorrect information. The SP, for anybody on here, the SP, the EIR, all the backup documents for that project, they are available on the city website, and they are available for review. I will have to check that point. But I believe that was part of the discussion. You know, I haven't necessarily been involved with each of those discussions as they move through. My understanding is that project submitted in 22, you know, sometime, you know, mid to late 2022. This project, we were still 2019. So the impacts of it, you know, we were looking at this project without that. That project, once it goes through the process, once it gets a hearing, and once the decision is made, you know, that impact has to be analyzed and mitigated as part of that. I am not going to presuppose any decision on that project. So when I'm looking at the land right now, there is no entitlement on it. It does not exist. So as I am looking at this road project, it's not there. Now, that's not to say that we are ignoring that development project and what their impacts could be, but it's being looked at as part of that development project.
Okay, we're going to take this question right here.
Nate,
we're going to just...
there was one more point to that question that I didn't quite get to, and it was the enforcement. You know, if that was to go through, it's a challenge, and you know, it's something, you know, Beaumont is considering as well. Is they're looking at developments on the south side of the freeway on the 60 there. Is how do you determine whose truck is whose, and then how do you have an enforcement mechanism for that? There are some emerging technologies that are being looked at, and that's something that's, you know, a point that's going to have to be considered, you know, when those projects are being considered. You know, it's a police matter, you know, for enforcement. It's not something in Public Works. I don't have staff that's going to go out there and do that. It's something that, you know, will be kind of taken care of by police.
Got people back here.
So I didn't realize it's already 2 o'clock.
Yes, okay. I'm going to take 2 more questions right here.
Okay. We live on the north side,
Okay.
and we go over to the main side via golf cart. And how will we feel safer? Is the city going to put a stoplight, golf cart crossing with extra something? Mm-hmm. How do we feel safe with the big rigs running down, the overflow from Highland, all these new projects going in? How do we feel? How do we feel safe? What is the city thinking about for us?
So, side to all this, right? We are working on what's called an active transportation plan. So it was a completely separate project that is looking at non-motorized uses, so non-vehicular, so bicycles, pedestrians, golf carts, trying to include safety as part of that. That's in the works. We are looking at what options could be along these corridors that we've identified as potential active transportation corridors, Sun Lakes being one of them. I don't have an answer as to what mitigation is going to be best at this point. Because the mitigation is going to be different if developments don't happen, the intensity of the mitigation is going to be different than if they do happen, right? Where, right now a stop sign would be sufficient, if there's, we're not creating uses that would draw trucks. That may not be the case if that's there, and it would need a stop signal, a stop traffic light. So, it's on our minds, but depending on timing on when and how everything comes through is going to dictate what is going to be the best alternative, and the best way to provide that cross connection from the north side of the community to the south.
One question over here and one question right here, and then we don't have any time for any more questions. I'm sorry, Nate has got an appointment at 2 o'clock. Go ahead.
Okay, we understand there's also the Caltrans project pending at Highland Springs and the freeway.
Yes.
So is that in any way predicated on this being done so we have access while the other project's being done? And that would basically be it.
That sure would be nice. When we're looking at the timing, if everything goes to plan, knock on wood again, right? That prior to them being able to start construction on there, that we will be wrapped up with this project. So that way there is that alternative, and it's not going to be the mess that is there. Now, the Caltrans project for Highland Springs, we're still in the environmental phase. It has taken longer than RCTC anticipated that it was going to take. Caltrans is not quick. So, the project alternatives, will dictate also what the impact is. There's some alternatives that were considered that would have a major impact on the through roadway. There's other alternatives that would have a much more minor impact. But, as far as that goes, hopefully there'll be decisions in summer, fall, and we can share some more information at that point. But my hope is that we have this in place prior to that construction being started.
Last question.
Mike, is it?
Nate.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time here, and you've been courteous to field some of the questions. Sorry about that. Well, thank you for coming, and you've been courteous in fielding the questions, which we can hardly separate truck traffic, from these projects and the Sun Lakes Boulevard extension. One of the concerns are obviously warehousing, and truck drivers tend to arrive at different times, based on their arrival appointments. Mm-hmm. And they park all over the place, and even for evenings, et cetera. So is there any plan for the extension to have any traffic violation signs related to the westward extension?
Yes.
And there are.
So my intent for a roadway, especially a roadway that we're looking at considering for a active transportation corridor, right, is that it is also a roadway where parking is prohibited. Flat, that's it.
What about the rest of Sun Lakes Boulevard here?
The rest of Sun Lakes Boulevard is part of that active transportation corridor. So if we're able to take a Galt Carp extension from where it currently ends on First Street, run that all the way down to Sunset, right? Then, as a consequence of that, we would look to say that parking is prohibited on Sun Lakes Boulevard. And, from a larger perspective throughout the city, similar classification roads. We're getting into like major roads on Ramsey, within the commercial corridor, if we're going to put these facilities in, similar, right? That there'll be off-street parking off of major roads, on-street parking on minor roads. So, but this corridor, I am anticipating that there will be parking prohibited for the entire length.
Related to traffic violation, related to traffic codes?
Yes.
Specifically?
Because we'll have the bike lane there, you're not allowed to block a bike lane. So the only way that we could allow for parking is if the parking lane was provided separate of a bike and golf cart extension. So if I've got 4-lane road, 2 lanes each direction, plus a little 2-foot buffer, right? And then I could put like a 10-foot golf cart lane, there's no room for parking. So by the nature of putting in that element, parking would not be permitted on the roadway.
Okay, I'm sorry, no more questions. Nate has an appointment and he is late. I am so sorry, Nate, but I told you.
That's
I
fine.
told you.
I'll put a call and they'll understand. So I do appreciate this. This is a big project. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's good to get information out. We're happy to answer any questions. For development questions, I would defer to Adam Rush at Community Development if you send him a message. If you have anything specific, I can try to help out. I'll work with Michelle if there's particular questions on there. But I do appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to the community here. I really do.
Again, thank you, Nate. I so appreciate you coming out. So our next program we have coming up now is Bob Hicks and the OPA. Everything you wanted to know about OPA and we're afraid to ask.
Good afternoon, everyone. A few weeks ago, Michelle called us and said that there was a window here to piggyback on the community awareness program to let a broader group of audience from Sun Lakes understand a little bit more about what's referred to as the OPA project. And so, bottom line is, as you can see up on the screen, OPA is simply an acronym for Organizational Policy Process Assessment. Excuse me. I am not infectious in any way. I have a really bad sinus and allergy reaction, so pardon me if I cough a few times. Bottom line is the OPA project was created after starting out as something else. It originally started out as a master planning suggestion to the board, and the reality is that we do have something called a master plan that is on the website, but it's basically just a few pages of list of things to do. And it's not really a strategic plan as to how to run and operate Sun Lakes. And so, bottom line is the original focus, which started in 2022 to develop a master plan for Sun Lakes, morphed into the realization, after we realized that we don't have a lot of policy in place, it morphed into let's define what our policy and governing is all about. And so, pardon me. The board last year, at the end of last fall, created the OPA task force. And the role of the OPA task force was to fundamentally try to work and identify a consultant who is qualified to help the organization develop the governing policies that Sun Lakes can benefit from. And our role is not to write the policies. Our role is to essentially be the eyes and the ears and the local contact for the consultant that was hired to do this. We basically, our fundamental role is to collect information, and as I said, it's not to develop the policies themselves. So, in a little bit of historical background here, the project was derived, as I said, from the initial board's decision to develop a comprehensive master plan initiative for our community. In the fall of 2022, the board authorized the master plan initiative team to create a request for proposal for the creation of a comprehensive strategic plan. The board recognized the need for to be more effective in establishing HOA priorities and decision-making. Ron Varner coined the phrase, we have a lot of organizational disconnect. We have a lot of good intentions and a lot of things going on, but somehow or another things just don't happen quite the way we want them to. And so the question is, why? And so in February of 23, a request for proposal was developed and sent to several qualified HOA consulting companies. In March of 23, Sequoia Grove Consulting, SGC, was selected as the most qualified. The board decided to defer the decision to proceed with the proposed consulting agreement until after the next election. So essentially, this is a carryover from last year. So it's not like this is a new idea. This has been in germination for quite some time. In early April of this year, of 23 rather, the MPI team suggested to the board to modify the master plan initiative because we discovered that few, if any, formal policies actually existed, which may be surprising, and I'll address that for you in just a moment. This goes a long way, though, to explaining why one board's decision-making priorities and processes have varied so much from year to year and board to board. In the absence of formal governing policies, board decisions would continue to be somewhat chaotic, inconsistent, and subject to the composition of a particular board with little continuity. So you have people who say, vote for me because I'll set you free. They come, they have their own ideas to what that is, but it's not in context with the bigger plan. And so it's been very disruptive in our community, you know, especially with the impact of the COVID process in 2020. It kind of magnified all of this. Excuse me. In the absence of formal governing policies, boards' decisions, well, I already said that. The essential part of the project was to identify all Sun Lake's operating policies and processes and determine which ones were appropriate and what needed to be added or changed to enable the board, management company, committees, and sub-associations to function more effectively and efficiently. The MPI was reconceived accordingly, and an organizational policy process assessment task force consisting of the members' names up there, myself, Raylene Kretschmann, Cal Martin, Ron Varner, and one other person, Shannon McKinney, who unfortunately decided to go on a cruise rather than show up here today and participate. We were appointed by the board to then take this project forward. I made mention a moment ago as to, you know, how is it that Sun Lakes can be sitting here and not really have any governing policy? And it is really kind of easy if you take a step back for a moment and consider that what we have are CC&Rs and bylaws. And those CC&Rs and bylaws are a work product of the original developer of our community. They needed to do it to satisfy federal and state laws. So, but they're a corporation, so they have their own policies. They know how to run things. They have their own job descriptions. Okay? They know how to organize a project. So what happens is in 2024, the last property was built, and the developers then unplug from Sun Lakes and turn over the entire board to volunteer members of the community. But what they take with them, they leave the CC&Rs and bylaws, of course, but what they take with them is all the methods and procedures and the professionalism to run an organization. So that all goes away. And this, and what we've learned in working with a consultant whose name is Karen Conlon, is that this is common. And you know, it really impacts larger HOAs much more than it does small ones. And so this is a means to remedy that issue, but it also explains why we don't have any. When I have said that to people before, they say, no, that can't be possible. The very first thing we did, which I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, the very first thing we did was ask First Services to please scan your databases and give us a list of all the policies that actually are there. We received 4, one of which was an investment policy. So you can imagine that, you know, they really aren't there. The OPA task force was given the directive to create a new project plan for the board to consider, which would determine how effectively the entire HOA organizational governance components are being utilized and work in unison to the best advantage of Sun Lake's members. In July of 23, the OPA team was authorized to prepare a request for engagement letter. In August of 23, the board received a consulting agreement from Sequoia Grove. After a number of master board discussions, including the OPA team and FSR, the agreement, including a 4-phase scope of services with estimated timelines, was approved by the board in early October 23. The project was initiated in 23 when Ms. Conlon came to Sun Lakes and gave an overview of the purpose and importance of creating formal governing policies and the OPA project. Invitees included the Master Board, Chair and Co-Chair of Chartered Committees, Sub-Association President, Vice President, key FSR managers, excuse me, and members of the Delegate Assembly. Ms. Conlon also requested that each member of the Master Board anonymously answer a series of questions she provided them to make sure that their expectations for her were realistic. So there was a registration done above and beyond a letter agreement that described what the scope of activities were. She actually interviewed them, and then that information has also been used to influence the scope of her work. The final comment I want to make is that the project is listed as 4 phases. The first 3 phases are specifically stated as fixed price. The 4th phase is a phase that's there that can be evoked in the option of Sun Lakes. It is not part of the project per se, because the board was concerned that they may or may not have the resources to effectively implement all these governing policies as quickly as possible. And so they wanted to know if she would be available to assist in that. And so if the board chooses to do so, then they will prepare a list of things that they would request her to do for them, and that would also be fixed price. So there's no loose ends here. There's no project overruns. And it also is a very aggressive schedule that we had, and as you'll see next, or not next, but in a few moments, the status of what's transpired and where we are today. And right now, we're on track for what we originally committed to do. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Raylene Kretschmann, who's going to talk to you about what is the real objective of the OPA project, and hopefully give you a little deeper insight.
I thank you all for being here. And you've heard a lot of information, so instead of reading an article to you, I'm going to direct you. It's very informative. We've kept everyone updated in the lifestyles. In the November Lifestyles is an excellent article that explains OPA very simply, and I encourage you to read this. It's also updated in your March issue of the Lifestyles. Again, it tells you exactly where we are with the project. And with that, I'm going to tell you my opinions. I want to emphasize the critical importance of having a governance policy for our HOA Master Board. I personally was quite shocked to discover that our board members have lacked a policy or any manual to guide them in discharging their roles and responsibilities. How can we expect them to effectively fulfill their duties without clear guidance? Even the most junior employee receives a job description upon hiring, yet our board members have been functioning without such fundamental tools. I commend our Master Board for recognizing this need and taking steps to address it by implementing a governance policy manual for both the current and future board members. This policy will provide structure and rules for decision making. Every member of the Master Board must understand their roles and responsibilities, and this governance policy serves as a roadmap for them to follow. The implementation of a governance policy is not just a procedural matter. It's a testament to the current board's dedication to Sun Lake's continued progress. By equipping our Master Board with clear guidelines, we foster an environment of accountability, transparency, and efficiency. This isn't just about paperwork. It's about ensuring that decisions made are in the best interest of our community. With effective governments as our foundation, the board paves the way for Sun Lakes to evolve into an even stronger, more vibrant place to call home. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Cal Martin, and just like the project engineer from the city of Banning, I am now speaking before the public, which is somewhat intimidating. And they do tell you that if you're speaking in front of a group, the best thing that you can do is imagine everybody in their underwear. So if you folks would please just take a moment, stand and remove your outer clothing. I will feel much more comfortable. You may not, but I will. My portion here is to tell you where all of the OPA tasks that we have completed to this point in time. Someone gave me the mistake of handing me an open mic and telling me that I could also speak freely. So I need to, if you don't know what an OPA is in German, that's a grandpa. And I think it's probably apropos, given that you can see the panel up here that participated in this particular project. A lot of people spent a lot of time preparing the documents that were sent to the consultant. I was fortunate enough to break my leg just as this project started, and I lay in the rehab under heavy narcotics for several weeks and couldn't participate in the start, where a lot of the work got done. So I got to come in at the end and kind of sweep up and clean up and be part of the end of this task. When I was first asked to be part of the OPA project, I had no idea what an OPA was. I didn't have any idea why the Sun Lakes Board thought we needed an OPA. I really didn't know anything about it. Now I've spent most of my working career in business management, but I can tell you that terms like governance policy and what else did I write down here? Organizational process assessment, which is what OPA means, those weren't the buzzwords that floated around our building. We didn't use those. But the more I got into the jargon of what was being used and the more I understood about the project, the more I realized that these were common sense things that we had been doing in business for many, many years as a process by which we could make effective change in the organization. And you make effective change in most organizations by having an employee manual, a company handbook, something by which all of the employees, although they're given great on-the-job training by the guy who learned it from the last guy who had the job, who learned it from the dead guy who had it before him, which leaves certain room for error, having a company manual that folks can refer back to after training is something that gives people confidence, and it gives them the ability to actually prosper in their efforts because they can then do it with confidence and they know the boundaries, really, to succeed. So many small companies, my accountant used to say, I had a small company to start with, and when you have a small company, he said, you can hold it like this. You can hold it in your hands just like this. But as the company grows, you have to spread your hands out, do it, and then things start to fall through the cracks. And if you've ever been in a company where somebody asked you to come in and write down everything that you do and turn it in, then you know that somebody was basically on the same path. They were trying to get documentation in place so that that organization could then be stable for the next person that had to occupy that particular position. And that is really, really important for success, and it's good for Sun Lakes to do this too. It's good for Sun Lakes because when somebody takes over in a new position, just as I understand the board took over and there wasn't anything to work with from the previous board, they didn't have anything to refer to, you kind of have to reinvent the wheel. And reinventing the wheel every time sometimes means you get, kind of square blocks instead of round wheels. One board may work great and the next one doesn't because there is not any continuity of what's going on. So that's really kind of what OPA is all about. Now, our portion of OPA isn't, again, as people have said, to write policy. We're not here to tell people what to do. All we're really doing, we're kind of like flesh-covered tape recorders, walking around telling people, asking people what they do and then putting it down on a piece of paper so that the next person can do the same thing or hopefully improve upon it. Having said that, I can tell you that right now the OPA team is primarily finished with their assigned tasks. That's the long and the short of it. I'll go back over the history here. It's kind of started back, as I said, near the first part of December. We completed the first round of interviews with Master Board on November 28th, and we did a second round on 12/19. And the purpose of those interviews basically is to interview board members, all the board members, to get their thoughts on what needed to happen, how this should be executed, what should happen, and its priority. We then turned to the chartered committees and the sub-associations, their board members, and tried to determine, again, their perspective on their roles and their working relationships with the board and FSR. Again, we're trying to define what the patterns are within the organization so that they can be not only maintained, but hopefully improved upon. After that, we assisted FSR with research and identification on any possible policies or formal processes that they might have, which is kind of difficult because some of that may not have transferred when FSR actually took responsibility for management of the HOA. And then we analyzed what the FSR executive and director level job descriptions were. This was kind of a win because FSR had never released their job descriptions to anybody. And admittedly, these were the job descriptions that FSR had for the purpose of recruiting. If somebody came into the role of general manager, what education did they have to have? What skill set did they have to have? That's basically the set of job descriptions that we got from them. We tried to interweave with that, with certainly the input from the board, what would be best to add to this that is particularly applicable to Sun Lakes. It might be great for everywhere else in the country, but what's different about Sun Lakes that should be included on the requirements for someone who's being hired for the purpose of serving Sun Lakes? Pretty straightforward. So we completed that. We also we reviewed and summarized the report findings to Ms. Conlon and uploaded them to her archive. My personal side note again here with my open mic is Sun Lakes really needs to own their own data. Every organization here at Sun Lakes has their own database. They have somebody's computer in somebody's house retaining this information, and goodness knows we're all on the back nine in life. You don't know how things are going to change or how fast they're going to change, and when perhaps that computer that Johnny had down in his house, when Johnny goes away, so does all that data. And that actually should be shared within the community, but until we actually have an initiative within the community to have a centralized database owned by Sun Lakes, that's not going to happen. The FSR database is not ours. It belongs to FSR. And when they leave, they take their data with them. We summarized all of our report findings to Ms. Conlon, and we uploaded them to the Sequoia Grove Dropbox for her analysis. And then she, in turn, returned, that was completed in January on the 19th. Ms. Conlon then returned an index of primarily the first document she had sent back to the board of the master index for all of the governing policy on the 5th of February. And everyone had review and comment on that to see how it might be improved or customized, particularly for Sun Lakes. And then the last thing that we did was we all sat in one of the executive sessions with a Zoom meeting. She lives in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and she stayed there and talked us through what this was, and finalized the project scope and priorities for development of the governing policy manual that would be forthcoming, which I believe has now been sent for review. And at that point in time, I'm going to give Ron his mic in his turn to talk about how nervous he is to speak to all of you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Ron Varner, obviously, and my job here is pretty easy to talk about the next steps, which, as you heard from Cal, we're just about done. But before, I want to just add to some of his comments. Is that better? Too loud? I wanted to just add to some of Cal's comments about old guys like us that were in industry and professionally running businesses years ago. It wasn't called OPA. In my day, it was called Organization Clarification. And there's some concepts in organization that are fundamental, should be followed. There's a lot of creativity today going on throughout the world, violating some of the fundamental concepts, probably starting in Washington, D.C. But anyway, I want to comment on the term organizational disconnect. I think I was one who helped coin that. And as a lot of you know, I was on the Finance Advisory Committee for 5 or 6 years. I was also acting treasurer for the association on 2 different occasions. And in dealing with all the issues in Sun Lakes, not just financially, but it became very apparent that some of the elements of organization weren't properly connected. So we all talk about the lack of results that we expect out of our food and beverage operation, and a lot of that is due to an organizational disconnect that results in somebody having responsibility for results, but they aren't assigned that. Or if you look at their position description, they're not responsible for results. And so it always resulted that the board of directors was responsible for everything, including what color the menus ought to be in the restaurant. But again, the OPA project started looking at a workflow. And so we did analysis of how things get done, and we diagrammed it, and it was amazing how it was like looking at a diagram of cows going over the hill to the other pasture, and there were just roadways everywhere. So what the OPA project intends to do, and we just got at Sun Lakes Country Club governing policies of the board of directors. And the implementation of this will create what I call a linking pin concept, and that means each element of the organization has to link to other elements, because if they don't, then the end result isn't what it should be, because there's a disconnect. So the next steps, and as Cal said, we were due to receive a working draft of, and it's 30-some pages. This is just the outline. It's 30-some pages, and we got it late yesterday. So we were supposed to get it tomorrow, so we're ahead of schedule on one of the most important last steps. And there will be a time period, about 2 weeks, to review this. So this went to not just our committee, or our task force rather, it went to the board of directors, and it went to First Service management. And so First Service has been involved in this project from day one, starting with initially meeting with them and just saying, what are all the processes that take place here at Sun Lakes? And there's an enormous amount of processes. And some are formal within committees. The bulk of them are informal, or they are First Service policies and procedures. So this will be reviewed, and there will be a Zoom call on March 13th with Karen Conlon, and I'll refer to them as SGC, Sequoia Grove Consulting, to review the policy manual and to talk about what revisions, additions, deletions, modifications should be made. And I can just tell you that the policies are in 3 different categories. So there are policies that relate to just the board. There are policies that relate just to First Service, and then there are policies that relate to both. And it's everything you can imagine, from communication to how employees should be treated, and just quite a number of governance items. So the final adjustments will be sent to the board on March 20th, and the Sequoia Grove will present an implementation plan, which is highly critical. And it's not just implementation, but it's consistency and how continuity will take place. And those of you that have followed policy and procedure and the lack thereof here know that from board to board, the board can continue with, discontinue, and in some cases it happens without anybody knowing it, even the board, because there was never a manual of policies and procedures. So implementation plan will be presented by Sequoia Grove, and she will be available to assist on that if desired. This wasn't part of her contract. Her contract had ended with the end of phase 3, which we're just completing right now. So the newly elected board will have the final decision on the schedule for implementation and approval. So I think other than that, I've commented enough. So, Bob. Yes.
Yeah, we'd like Chris Mitchell to make some comments from the FSR perspective.
Oh, I didn't see Chris over there. I saw him come. I thought he left.
I thought he was going to get away without talking, but I found him.
3 minutes, that's fine. I'm used to it. Okay, just quickly, just to clarify some items on it. And I heard people laugh when Ron talked about the restaurant and the menu. And this has been a frustration for me because the members will send me comments. Candidates running will blame management for running how the restaurant is run, but they fail to realize, even though they may have participated in committees, that the board called the shots. The board set the prices for alcohol. The board set the prices for food. So my frustration, why I'm embracing this, is how can you judge the management company on the performance when you handcuff them on what they can do? And so that has been a big issue for many years that has been going on. And so when this came up, and Bob talked about this, about a governance model that sets the roles and responsibilities for the board, for the management company, the expectations of the management company, the expectations of the committees, that was music to my ears because I've worked in government. There was continuity because once an administration left, another administration would come in, and the playbook would already be laid out. You had 30-year plans for items. We struggled just to get a 2-year plan. And again, that is where the HOA industry changes, the boards change. And this is a valiant effort, I believe, that will benefit the community because the playbook is there. The management company has their process and procedures. The board, as Bob said, had few that were submitted in a little book. The rest of the process and procedures that were approved by the board were within the minutes. So what you'd have to do is go back 5 years when a prior administration said this is the policy that we'll enact. And it does make difficult, so a new board comes in, they're ready to say, okay, I'm ready. We do an orientation going over the law, the expectations, but there's not a handbook that says this is the handbook of all the policies that have been in the past, when it's been renewed, what's going on with it. So I know I'm looking at you 3 minutes, the little clock is. So what I want to say is I know there's a lot of fear. There's fear out there. Change does sometimes bring fear. But this is an opportunity to have some organization and some standards, some expectations going forward for future boards, management team, etc., that is really needed because in the absence of it, you have chaos. And no one succeeds in an environment of chaos, and it becomes frustrating. People get frustrated, committees get frustrated, and members get frustrated. And so this is we're hoping, and that's why I've embraced this group. I'm not giving them hugs, that will be after the meeting. But I do want to also point out that I reached out to our corporate team because they've also been involved, as Bob said, in the contractual negotiation, the involvement with governance. And from the discussions, this is from my corporate leadership. From the discussion with corporate leadership, governance policy is ideal for business relationships. Moving to policy-driven association helps identify the policy and allows the management team to execute the policy. The corporate leadership team is supportive of policy-driven boards and that they are grateful to partner with the board to accomplish this task. In the end, a governance policy helps management lead proactively instead of being a reactive. Ken Johnson always talks about that. Why are we always reactive and never proactive, never looking down the road of what's coming, because we're just trying to fight the fires now. So with that, I believe this is a great effort. I'm glad you all volunteered. You're getting paid big bucks. I think you get a free water bottle afterwards. But with that, that was my 2 cents on this matter.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so now we are going to open it up for questions. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll come around to you. I know somebody's got to have one question. They answered everything? Okay, here we go.
Hi there. This isn't a plan. Oh, good. I had a voice when I came in. Will we continue on an annual basis with a contract with the, I forget the letters he used. Yeah, Astoria.
Yeah, no, this is a one-time effort to essentially assemble the governing policy and then see that it's implemented. And then, hopefully at that point it becomes self-sustaining. It's going to take some time. Implementing will probably take 6 to 9 months because, you advise everybody as to here's the policy, you train them as to what it means, but then you have to watch and see how people actually interpret that. And it's going to take some coaching, if you will, and some reminders of, no, remember that's not what the policy says. So there's going to take some practical application. But what the hope is, and what my personal experience is in being involved with organizational development in my professional career, is that once you get a system in place and it shows positive results, people are very reluctant to diverge from it unless they have a very good reason to do so. And of course, policies are not monolithic. They're a living document. And so as circumstances change, as economic environments change, the demographics of Sun Lakes change, there will be a need to revise policy and process accordingly. And so, but this project with Sequoia Grove, to answer your question specifically, will officially end when she turns in the project plan, as Ron said, in the latter part of March.
Okay, maybe I missed it, but when do you think the membership will see a draft?
The membership will see it when, probably after the election. I'm just saying probably because I don't know when the master board might want to release it, but the draft has gone to the master board, and they will then review it and request changes and modifications, and then they'll go through an iteration of that with Ms. Conlon. But the idea will be that this is posted on the website. I mean, it's there for everybody to see and understand. And my other hope is that we get rid of this cleans up an awful lot of communication problems that we have of First Services being dumped with millions of questions. When it's simply people could say, well, there's a policy for that. Go to the website, click on such and such, and look at it, read it for yourself. And if you don't like the policy, send in a comment to management requesting a change. And rather than all this little constant dialogue all the time. Linda.
Oh, I'd like to really compliment the committee or the group or the task force. I've been in organizational development, was a consultant for a number of years, so I know the tremendous work you went through. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
My comment is implementation. I'm very concerned, having had some experiences in this area, that it's wonderful you've developed it, you've had an outside consultant review things, you've taken all the discombobulated information and made it a handbook. That's terrific. But it'll die unless it's implemented in such a way that it can keep itself revived. And it takes training. People can read and say, oh, that looks good, and then they ignore it. So there has to be an implementation system of some sort. Not you guys, you've done a great job. But again, if it just falls to the master board all the time to implement this and then keep it going, I would look for some output within these changes to have internal groups that work, the various committees and things that get to say and give feedback on a regular basis so they can see how it's implemented over months or years.
Yeah, you're a very wise man. Anybody that's been involved with this kind of thing knows that, you know, whether you're talking about software systems, how well they're used depends on how well they're implemented. And so it's very wise. And you know, the unfortunate thing, or fortunate, depending on your point of view, and it's in the Lord's hands anyway, so I think it's fortunate. We're in an election season, and so the board, you know, felt that it was premature for them to just say we're going to implement this. And so let the election season finish, and the results of that will determine who's on the board and whether or not anything even comes of it. It's entirely possible that a new board composition may just decide that this isn't as big a priority as it needs to be. And as you just pointed out, it needs to be a #1 priority. You can't do this when you're spare time. It has to take #1 priority. The current board's committed to do that, and we've warned them about it. We've warned them that it's some of the things in here are going to upset people because they've got notions that things have always been done a different way. They don't want to change. And you know, the whole, and of course anything that's in here is open for discussion. And the whole thing is, everything that's done needs to make sure it mirrors back to the mission and vision statement for Sun Lakes. Everything. Everything that's done, whether it's in a committee, delegate assembly, sub-associations, or the board. Thank you.
Well, I also want to thank you for the work. It looks very comprehensive and it sounds pretty good. My question is how, you scared me there for a minute when you said some people are not going to like it. I mean, how is it going to impact the membership? In what way?
Yeah. Well, what way? Probably the membership will hopefully just see good things happen faster, okay, is the net result. What I'm saying is, you know, through the people that are politically active in our community and, you know, whether it's officially on a committee or just because they like to be involved and show up at board meetings and so forth, things will change. And any time something changes, somebody will probably say, sooner or later, you know, I don't like that because that's not the way I used to do it. And, but it won't be that stricter requirements are going to be put on people, but where it may actually happen is accountability is the key to all of this. So if you're charged with doing something, the question will eventually come to, have you been doing it successfully? And accountability. The board will be periodically, annually reviewed, for example, in their performance. So will First Services. First Services will review their employees for performance. Those are all part and parcel. The accountability aspect of this is what might bother some people.
Will the master board still determine the color of the menu?
I hope not. I certainly hope not. Yeah. Nor the napkins. I think the napkins are well within the purview of the First Services.
Bob, can I say something real quick? To answer how this affects the community, everyone out there has an opinion. One person thinks the board is good, one thinks it's not doing their job. They think FSR sucks, the other one thinks they're great. How do you know? If you do not have something to judge them by, just like in my environment in corporate America, if I didn't have a job description, I couldn't review you. So how do you know Chris is not doing his job? What's his job? So this manual will provide that information, not just for the board, but for the rest of us to know what they're doing. And it also will hold the board accountable because they're going to be judged by the same standards. So that's a simplistic way to say it's how it's going to involve you.
Just so I understand, this will include the actual procedures and policies and job descriptions? So at the end of the day, on the website or binder or whatever, all the policies and procedures will be documented? Is that part of this project then, what the consultant is doing? Okay.
Yes, it will all be posted on the web, because this is all community product. By the way, this is coming from your capital improvement fund. So it's a product, it's a work product that is there to help us run our organization better. So, it is a very modest investment that we made. This project so far, I think, well, when it's finished, it will be in the low 20,000.
My question is, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for doing this. I think it's much, much needed, especially for the newcomers that are moving into our community. Number two is when my husband and I had our company, we had a booklet for our employees. The accountability of what they had to do, HR, legally what we had to do in order to have things implemented and people safe. So my question is, when you meet with the board, would you do that prior to a board meeting? Every 3 months, every 6 months, just to keep update that things are in line? Will it be together with the board? Because I like the accountability thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that will be recommended officially is that another task force be created. And maybe task force is not the right word, but it might even be committee. But don't quote me on this. But it will be governance policy implementation team. And it will go for some period of time. So maybe it's an ad hoc committee, because at some point you won't need them there. But they will be integrated in with the board in a way that's acceptable with Davis Sterling and all that other stuff. So that as decisions are being made, we want to make sure they're made in the proper governance policy.
Couple more questions over here. Do here and then Dawn.
Hi, I'm Sandra GetConnect. So this is really interesting to learn. I've been reading about it in Lifestyles, and it hasn't meant a lick of sense to me, but now it does. So thank you. And it does seem like something that's very much needed. And one of the questions I had, just from things that I hear, and I'm sure I'm not the only person here who has served on boards of directors for things, but for instance, I'm on the board of directors for my HOA in Silicon Valley, where I still own a house. We're only 17 units, but there's 6 of us. And I've been on the board of a nonprofit with only $1 million budget, and there were 13 of us. And so it's really surprising to me that an organization of this size has only 5 board members. And when you tell me they're making decisions about the colors of the menu, I think, but we have a restaurant advisory committee, except then I hear you saying that should be the purview of First Service. And so I guess one of my questions in this assessment of policies, and I think what I've read was something about the connection between the board, the chartered committees, any ad hoc committees, the district delegates, and then the management company, right? We have 5 entities. And when you said that, I'm used to, I would make presentation to my former employee who had a 25-member board. The boards had committees. The boards had committees, and then, subcommittees, and you came back and reported your recommendations. And it seems like we don't use the chartered committees in that way. It's like, well, you're retired, you're on a committee, it's kind of fun, whatever you want to do is fine. But we're the board, there's only 5 of us, but we make all the decisions. And it seems like the committee should be charged from the board with decisions that come back, kind of used in that way. So I'm just wondering, that is part of this process, right? And Karen, I went on her website and looked her up. She sounds wonderful. But how are the committees to be engaged? So that's one question. And then the second one is just when you talk about accountability, what is the teeth in this? So there's performance reviews of the board. If they're violating policy, they can be removed from the board, or their hands slapped, or, you know, is that part of the process as well? What is the disciplinary
Let me answer that last
action?
question first, and that is that that's all a function of the bylaws and CCNRs. Policy would not, put things of that nature would not be part of policy. It would be the place for that kind of thing is in the bylaws and the CCNRs, and there are ways to remove boards of members that are in our bylaws. Your first question, I'm not sure I want to get into the weeds as far as your question might lead me, but bottom line is when we look at the committees, there's really two groups. Ones whose primary purpose is to support the board, and the others whose purpose is really to support FSR. Examples of the latter, FSR, would be the Recreation Committee, Lifestyles, and the Library Committee. Examples of committees that are primarily there to support the board would be Procurement Advisory, Financial Advisory, and so the committees will have different focus, but the one thing you have to be careful of is an advisory committee means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Advisory, in the context that the four of us and Ms. Conlon take it, is exactly that, advisory, not delegation to make authority. Okay? Committees should not be delegated authority to decide anything. Okay? They should be given the opportunity to provide research and information as like a support staff in the military and in government offices. You have a support staff that are out there whose sole purpose is to research and review and provide options and recommendations. Then the board retains the authority to appropriately to make the final decision as to what they want to do.
Bob, I'd like to just add to that. The advisory committees, this is back when I first got on the Finance Advisory Committee, I felt should be a staff function for both management and the board. So if you think of old conventional organization of line and staff, we don't have staff. We just have a line organization from First Service. So one of the intents of this project is to make sure that the committees clearly understand their role and how to do advisory, even how to communicate. So communications between the board and committees. I know when I got on the Finance Advisory Committee, the committee just said, we never hear from the board. We make a recommendation, nothing happens. And so just setting up a policy for how communications work, a formal, my first position after graduating from college was with the Procter & Gamble company, and we had how we're going to communicate. And there was actually, this is the way you communicate, and you do it simply so everyone understands. Here's the subject, here's the issue, here's our findings, here's our recommendations. Very simple. And just things like that. The result of this should be better financial planning, better financial results, certainly better transparency, formal understanding of communications. The end results should be better productivity by our management. And I mean, even I was just flabbergasted when we looked at flow charts of workflow, communication flow, up, down, sideways, back and forth, and taking a lot of time to get done what could get done in maybe 10 minutes. So anyway, again, the committees should be able to work more effectively as a result of this. And anyway, looks like Don?
My name's Don Day. I'm a simple guy. I'm not as articulate a speaker as all of these folks are. I would appreciate it if everybody kept their clothes on, though, okay? Couple things I'd like to address. First of all, the OPA team that has been working on this should be credited for the efforts that they put into it, okay? I've been very open with Ron Hicks and Ron Varner previously about a governance model, governance policies are important. But they pale in comparison today with some of the things that we really need to address immediately, okay? This project was developed in 16 executive sessions and was signed 6 weeks ago, and now we're hearing about what the policy and the program is. I'm glad we are hearing that. We'll go forward with it. The policies, unfortunately, don't address the immediate issues that we have. Ron spoke.
Don, I'd appreciate if you'd ask us a question rather than campaigning.
Perfectly, perfectly. The policies don't address the immediate needs. Why do we not address the missing policies and procedures that we need right now? The governance policies are important. We can do those. But why do we not have policies for purchasing? We do not have policies for receiving, inventory control. We have no policies like that. And other management companies will, other
Don,
full service
I think you need
has
to
not done
submit
it.
your questions to FSR.
Okay.
I don't want this to be a campaign platform.
It's not a campaign
yes,
platform.
Yes, it is. What you're doing is inappropriate.
That's fine.
Please turn over the microphone unless you have a specific question
The
about the project.
specific question is, why are we signing a contract for $22,500 when we need no pricing on the remaining implementation, which is important? Why we don't have a price on implementation? It's showing as time and materials in the contract. There's your question.
There's no need to answer that. We've already been answered that twice tonight. You're just trying to make campaign issues out of nothing, Don.
Okay, people are asking these questions, Bob.
No, they aren't. You are asking them. People are
Thank
not
you.
asking those questions.
Do we have any more questions regarding this that they need to answer? A question only. Did you have your hand up? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Is there a section in there that is going to tell people what the rule, the civil code and the Davis Sterling, so people know what to reference besides that book? So when I was in banking, we would have a page in our manuals that would tell us, oh, by the way, these are the regulations that control say the banking industry or the finance industry. So I find that might be helpful information to have in there also. Thank you.
Yes, Barbara, there's everything in the policies and procedures. This is outside of the CC&Rs. I don't think there's a policy on how to wash the kitchen sinks in the restaurant, but just about everything else, including code of conduct by members, by the meetings, and just because we've had some conduct in the past that's been unbecoming for those of us that think we're grown up anyway. So the answer is yes. And Don, I think the answer to what should have been your question is there will be policies and procedures on what you're talking about. The importance of doing this as a total project is to make sure we don't do what we've done in the past. And that's, we have a problem, we implement a solution with a process and procedure, and then it goes away. So it's how bureaucracies were created. If you look at Washington, D.C. and our federal government, where there are 10 organizations dealing with one issue, it's because of that. A department was created because of an immediate problem. And then, because they didn't have anything to do after solving the problem, they found things to do. So when the problem came up again, you had to create another agency. And so we're trying to prohibit that and do a comprehensive, not that it isn't needed, so.
Okay, so seeing no more questions and hearing no more questions, I think we're going to close this right now. So I appreciate everybody staying around, and thank you to OPA. I totally appreciate you coming and giving us more information and broadening our horizon on what you've been doing. Thank you.